They told me the Mariana Trench doesn't forgive mistakes. Down here, light doesn't reach, sound doesn't echo, and even time feels like it's holding its breath. We were given 11 strict rules before our descent. Strange ones that sounded more like warnings than procedures. Don't look too long through the viewport. Never count your reflections. Never answer if you hear your own voice coming from the intercom. I followed every one of them religiously, until curiosity got the better of me. I still remember the first time I broke a rule, and what surfaced after made me wish I'd never come down here. I didn't think much of it when they handed me the laminated sheet before the dive. 11 rules, printed in faded ink, taped beside the oxygen gauge as if they'd been there for years. The first one caught my eye immediately. Rule 1. Never look directly through the viewport for more than 10 seconds. It sounded like superstition, the kind of thing divers said to spook new recruits. But as we descended past 36,000 feet, the ocean outside stopped looking like water. It looked more like an endless mouth, waiting for someone foolish enough to stare back. The viewport was a thick dome of reinforced glass, just wide enough to see a slice of the abyss beyond the floodlights. The others avoided it, their faces always turned toward the monitors. But I couldn't help myself. The dark had a pull, like it was whispering to me without sound. My partner, Lewis, noticed me staring and muttered, "You're doing it again." His reflection in the glass looked stretched, his eyes darker than they should have been. I blinked, counted seconds in my head, and forced myself away before I reached 10. That first night, our submersible was docked at the research station wedged into the trench wall. The hum of machinery echoed through the metal, a sound that should have been comforting but wasn't. Everything felt too still, too contained, like the ocean was pressing its face against the hull, listening. We were told not to keep lights on when not working, something about conserving energy and avoiding unnecessary attention. I didn't ask what that meant, but the way the commander said it made me believe it wasn't just about power. On the third day, Lewis started getting nosebleeds. He said it was the pressure, but I saw the way he kept glancing at the viewport like it was calling to him. He'd turn it away with a nervous laugh, muttering about shapes he thought he saw outside. When I asked what kind of shapes, he said, "Like people, but not moving right." I told him he'd been down too long, that the deep plays tricks on your eyes. But when I looked myself, something brushed past the glass, slow, deliberate, almost curious. I tried convincing myself it was debris, a loose cable, maybe, but the thing's movement didn't match the current. It moved like it had control, pausing, then circling the viewport once before fading into the dark. My breath fogged the glass as I leaned closer, trying to catch one last glimpse. I counted silently, 6, 7, 8, before Lewis yanked me back and cursed under his breath. "You want to die down here," he hissed. I hadn't realized how close I was to breaking Rule 1 until he said it. My chest felt heavy, like something unseen had noticed me. That night, the lights flickered. It wasn't a power fluctuation. I've seen those. This was different, like something brushed against the outer sensors and drained them for a second. The commander's voice came over the intercom, ordering us to seal the viewport covers. I asked if it was a storm, but he said nothing, just repeated the order, his voice quieter the second time. When I went to close ours, I hesitated. I thought I saw movement again, right at the edge of the light beam. Not swimming, but climbing. We didn't sleep that night. The station creaked with every shift of the current. I could swear I heard faint tapping along the hull, rhythmic and distant. Lewis refused to look up from his bunk, muttering prayers he probably hadn't said since childhood. I sat near the viewport cover, staring at the faint glow that bled through the edges. For a moment I thought I saw a hand, pale, thin, and pressing lightly against the glass from outside. I blinked and it was gone, but the imprint of fingers remained in the condensation. By morning, the commander ordered a lockdown. He said the external cameras had malfunctioned, but his eyes told another story. Nobody was allowed near the viewports until further notice. During breakfast, Lewis asked him if this had happened before. The commander paused, then simply said, "That's why the rules exist." I wanted to laugh, but something about the way he said it, the tremor in his tone, made my stomach tighten. Later that shift, I had to check the ballast readings near the viewport console. The cover had to be lifted for manual access. I tried to keep my eyes down, focusing on the flickering screen, but my curiosity won. Just a glance, I told myself. 1 second wouldn't hurt. I lifted my head and saw nothing. Only the endless dark, no movement, no shape, just blackness, so thick it felt like staring into a living thing. I exhaled, counted silently, 2, 3, 4, then saw something shift. It wasn't outside. It was my reflection. But it moved wrong, slower, like a delayed echo of me. Its lips moved though mine didn't. I stumbled back, heart pounding, and the cover slipped from my hands, slamming shut. The sound echoed through the corridor. Lewis came running, eyes wide. "You saw it too," he whispered. I wanted to deny it, but I couldn't. The reflection had whispered something, or maybe it had thought it, and I'd heard it anyway. One word: surface. For the rest of that day, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been invited in. Every reflection, in the control panel glass, the polished steel, even the water in my cup, seemed a half-second delayed. Lewis refused to speak to me. He said I'd stared too long, that the ocean had marked me. I laughed at him then, but when I turned to the viewport cover again, there was a faint fogged outline of a face, pressed against it from the outside. Mine, smiling back. That night, Lewis vanished. His bunk was empty, the sheets damp, a trail of water leading toward the sealed viewport. The commander refused to open it, muttering that we couldn't afford another incident. When I demanded to know what he meant, he looked at me with eyes that hadn't slept in days. He said quietly, "That's all it takes." We searched the station for hours, but all we found was his diving helmet near the airlock, visor cracked from the inside. Now when I sit near the viewport, I can hear something faint behind the glass, breathing that syncs with mine, but comes a second late. I keep the cover sealed, but sometimes I catch glimpses of movement in the reflections of my instruments. It waits, patient, almost playful. The others won't talk to me anymore. I think they see it too. I stopped counting seconds long ago. I don't know if the 10-second rule keeps them out or keeps us in. The morning after Lewis disappeared, the commander ordered a full systems check. We were down to 4 crew members, and the air felt heavier than the pressure outside. I tried focusing on the diagnostics, but my thoughts kept drifting back to the last time I saw Lewis. His reflection in the viewport, his cracked helmet. I told myself I wasn't hearing things when the intercom clicked on behind me. Static first, soft and distant. Then my own voice came through, clear and calm. "It's safe now. You can open it." I froze. Every part of me remembered Rule 2. Never answer if you hear your own voice coming from the intercom. The sound of myself speaking, when I hadn't said a word, made my skin crawl. I stared at the comm panel, as if it were alive. The others were working in the corridor, too far to hear. The voice spoke again, slower this time, deliberate. "You shouldn't have looked." It wasn't playback. It couldn't be. The tone had hesitation, emotion, almost fear. I turned the volume knob down, but the voice didn't fade. It kept talking, matching the rhythm of my breathing. I could hear every exhale, every pause. It was as if something was listening to me breathe and repeating it a second later. The commander found me sitting on the floor, the intercom light still glowing red. He asked if I'd made contact with the surface. I said no. He stared at the speaker, then quietly unplugged the line and muttered that the trench sometimes talks back. I wanted to ask what that meant, but his face was pale, his hands trembling slightly as he disconnected the wires. That night, he reissued the rules to everyone, his voice hoarse. "If you hear yourself," he said, "don't answer, don't even acknowledge it." Sleep didn't come easily after that. I could hear faint whispers through the vents, sometimes laughter, sometimes my own name. The metal walls amplified everything, making it hard to tell if the sound was inside or out. Around midnight, the intercom flickered on again, static pulsing like a heartbeat. I covered my ears, but my own voice cut through the static. "You're running out of air," it said softly. I checked the gauges out of instinct. All normal. Then it added, "You shouldn't have left him outside." My stomach dropped. It was talking about Lewis. The next day, the commander ordered all intercoms disabled, except for emergency channels. But even with the systems cut, I could still hear faint breathing from the speakers. Not static. Breathing. Like someone was just on the other side, waiting for me to respond. I started keeping a log to distract myself, but even my recordings began picking up odd background noises. Faint echoes of my own voice saying things I never said. The commander told me to erase them, said audio corruption was common at these depths, but I could see the fear in his eyes. He didn't believe that either. 2 nights later, the emergency alarm blared, dragging me out of half sleep. We gathered in the control room, only to find the commander staring at the intercom. His own voice was coming through, calm, pleading. "Don't let it in," it said. "Don't static," cut him off mid-sentence. We all froze. The commander stepped back like he'd been struck. "It's not me," he whispered. The air felt colder, the lights dimmed for a heartbeat, then returned. I could hear faint murmuring behind the static now. Dozens of overlapping whispers, all of them fragments of us. The youngest crew member, a mechanic named Harlow, panicked. He shouted into the speaker, demanding whoever it was to stop. The moment he spoke, every voice on the intercom went silent except one, his own. It began repeating what he said, slower and slower, like it was tasting the words. "Stop," it said. Then again, lower. "Stop." Harlow backed away, but his own voice started calling his name now, each time closer, each time wrong. The commander tried shutting down the main power line to cut the feed, but the intercom stayed lit, humming softly, like it was alive. That night, Harlow vanished. The commander said he'd gone outside during maintenance, but the logs didn't show any hatch use. His helmet was missing, and the main corridor smelled faintly of salt. I checked the storage room, and the intercom there clicked on as I passed. My voice whispered from inside, "You shouldn't have come alone." I didn't look at it. I didn't speak. I just stood there, heart hammering, waiting for the sound to stop, but it didn't. The voice began humming, a tune my mother used to sing when I was a child. I couldn't move. The melody echoed perfectly, note for note. By the 5th day, I'd stopped sleeping entirely. I unplugged the intercom in my cabin, sealed the vents, and stuffed my ears with cotton, but it didn't matter. The voice had found other ways in. I'd hear it when I blinked, a whisper beneath thought itself, always in my tone. Sometimes it sounded scared, sometimes angry. Once when I looked into the reflection of the viewport cover, I saw my mouth moving a fraction of a second before I actually spoke. The reflection was answering questions I hadn't asked yet. The commander finally gathered what was left of us, just 3 now, and said we'd begin ascent the next morning. But the ocean doesn't care about plans. That night, the pressure alarms went off, blaring through the hallways. I ran to the control room, and every intercom on the wall was lit, all of them. A chorus of our voices filled the station, layered on top of one another, crying, laughing, whispering. The sound vibrated through the metal, through our bones. I couldn't tell which one was mine anymore. Then one of the voices, somewhere deep in that chorus, spoke clearly. "It's waiting for you above." Every light in the room went out. In the dark, the glow of the intercoms painted faint outlines of faces. Dozens, maybe hundreds, all pressed against the speakers, mouthing silent words. I stumbled back, but one of the panels sparked and hissed. I swear I heard my own laughter coming from inside it, muffled by static. The commander shouted for me to run, but his voice overlapped with another identical one, coming from the ceiling intercom. both speaking at once, both saying different things. When the lights came back, he was gone. Only his headset remained, coiled neatly on the floor, still warm. The intercom light blinked once more, and I heard my own voice whisper, calm and steady, "You're next." I don't know if I screamed or stayed silent. I only know that the sound that followed, a deep wet dragging through the corridor, didn't belong to any human. I sealed the control room and sat with my back against the door until my oxygen gauge began to dip. The intercom crackled one last time before going quiet. I'm alone now. The speakers are silent, but I keep seeing the indicator lights flicker when I breathe. I think it's copying me again, learning how to sound more real. I tell myself not to listen, not to respond, but sometimes, in the stillness, I catch myself whispering back without realizing it. The ocean outside feels closer, heavier, like it's leaning in. Maybe the voice isn't coming from the intercom anymore. Maybe it's coming from the water itself. Either way, I haven't spoken aloud in days. I'm too afraid it might answer. The storm that hit the trench 2 days later wasn't on any of our charts. Our sonar screens flickered, static crawling through every monitor, as if something outside was pressing its fingers against the glass. That night, the emergency generator began sputtering, and we could see the power readings dip every few minutes. I remembered Rule 3, never turn off the interior lights completely, no matter how much power you need to save. But when everything around you is shaking, it's easy to think rules are just precautions, not warnings. I was wrong. When the lights dimmed for the first time, the shadows inside the control room didn't move like ours. They twitched, reversed, then froze when the power came back. I was alone on the midnight watch when the next blackout hit. The hum of the generator coughed into silence, and the deep-sea pressure made the hull groan like something alive was scraping against it. I stood in the dark, holding my breath, trying to remember where the backup fuse box was. But there was something else, a low breathing sound that didn't belong to me. It came from the far corner of the room, where the glass viewport curved into blackness. My flashlight flickered once, then died completely. The breathing grew louder, closer, as if it had been waiting for the dark. When the emergency lights finally flickered back on, I caught a glimpse of something reflected in the viewport, a human shape, pale and floating upside down, staring in from the black. It looked like one of our crew, but its mouth was moving, slow and deliberate, like it was whispering through the glass. I stepped closer, trembling, and realized the lips were forming my name. That's when I saw the reflection didn't match my movements. When I raised my hand, it stayed perfectly still. I stumbled back and slammed my hand against the wall switch until the lights fully stabilized. The reflection blinked once and vanished. In the morning, when the others came to relieve me, I didn't tell them what I saw, but I noticed that every reflective surface on the station, monitors, tool screens, even the coffee pot had a faint shimmer, like something beneath was waiting to be seen again. We checked the generator, and Coleman, the engineer, said we'd have to ration light use until repairs were complete. I told him flatly that we couldn't, that we weren't allowed to shut them off completely, but he laughed and said, "You're starting to sound like the manual." That evening, when he killed power to the lower corridor to save a few volts, the screams came 5 minutes later. We found Coleman wedged between the pipes near the maintenance shaft, soaked and shivering, whispering that he had seen his own eyes open in the dark. His pupils were blown wide, his hands cut and bleeding like he'd been trying to claw something off him. He kept repeating, "They move when you don't." The rest of us decided right then we would rather run out of oxygen than light. From that night on, we took turns guarding the switches. Every flicker, every buzz, every fading bulb felt like a countdown to something waiting just beyond the glass. That same night, as I lay in my bunk, I noticed faint illumination under my door, even though all corridor lights were on full power. It was pulsing slowly, as if mimicking the rhythm of someone breathing. I held my breath, and it stopped. When I exhaled, it started again. I don't remember falling asleep, but I woke up to find my reflection on the metal cabinet staring back at me with eyes half a second too slow. By the next morning, we all agreed on one thing. Whatever happens down here, the dark isn't just absence, it's invitation. We rewired half the station just to keep the lights constant. Even the emergency strips glowed an eerie blue that made every shadow look alive. We stopped sleeping fully, afraid of waking to a blackout, and though no one spoke about it, every single one of us started keeping our reflections covered. When the sonar began pinging again, something massive moving slowly past the station, we didn't dare turn off the lights to avoid detection. Whatever was outside, it already knew where we were. But in the faint hum of electricity, I swear I could hear whispers matching the flicker of the bulbs, soft, distorted voices counting 1, 2, 3. The next time the power dips, I know what will happen. I've seen it reflected already. The first knock came while I was reviewing sonar logs. Faint but deliberate, 3 taps spaced evenly apart. At first, I thought it was just the creak of metal under pressure. But then it came again, 3 taps, same rhythm, same distance. We were 6 miles beneath the surface. Nothing alive should be able to reach the station walls, not with that kind of pressure. I froze, waiting for the others to react, but no one moved. Then, from the opposite end of the lab, a voice muttered, "Don't answer it. You remember Rule 4. If you hear knocking from the exterior hull, do not respond. They only knock when they've found you." The air in the lab thickened instantly. Even the usual hum of the lights seemed quieter. Everyone looked at each other, without saying a word, pretending to keep working, but our eyes betrayed us. We were all listening. The knocks came again, closer this time, traveling along the metal corridor, like something was tracing its way across the station. One of the junior techs, Morgan, swallowed hard and whispered that maybe it was debris from the storm. Coleman, still shaken from what happened with the lights, snapped, "That wasn't debris." The sound came once more, this time from directly behind the viewport glass. I didn't mean to move, but my body did it anyway. I stepped closer to the glass, squinting into the black, trying to see what was out there. The ocean was endless shadow, the station's light barely cutting a few meters out before fading into nothing. For a split second, I saw movement, a shape gliding just beyond the beam. Not swimming, not floating, gliding, like it was dragging itself across the current. I blinked, and it was gone. The others pretended not to notice, and we stayed frozen for what felt like hours, waiting for another sound that never came. But the silence felt worse. That night, Morgan broke. He said he couldn't handle the waiting anymore, that if something was out there, he wanted to know. I tried to stop him, but he went to the observation deck alone. He said he'd just knock back once, to see what would happen. We begged him not to, reminding him of the rule, but curiosity is poison down here. It grows in the dark. Minutes passed, then we heard the echo of metal, 3 faint taps from inside the viewing chamber. I ran to the door and shouted his name, but there was no answer. Then came a new sound, slow dragging movement against the outer wall like something was crawling over the hull. When we finally forced open the chamber hatch, it was empty. The interior lights flickered as the door sealed shut behind us. But outside, through the viewport, I saw him or something that looked like him, floating just beyond the glass, his hand pressed against it. He was smiling. His lips were moving, but I couldn't hear anything through the thickness of the sea. Coleman whispered that we should leave him, that it wasn't him anymore. We turned away, but the knocks started again, 3 times, perfectly timed with the pulse of the emergency lights. By morning the knocks had spread. Every few hours, they'd echo from different parts of the station, sometimes near the reactor chamber, sometimes beneath the sleeping quarters, always in 3s. No sonar reading, no life form detected, but the sound was too exact to be random. We even tried turning off certain systems to listen more clearly. That was a mistake. The last time we did, we heard breathing between the knocks, faint and wet, like something inhaling seawater just outside the wall. The captain finally ordered a lockdown. No one goes near the outer hull. No one listens too long. We played music through the intercoms to drown it out, static-filled and distorted, but even over the noise, I could still hear it sometimes. 3 knocks, pause, 3 more. It wasn't trying to get in, it was counting us. That evening, I dreamt I was standing outside the station, suspended in the trench, my gloved hand knocking on the metal door from the other side. In the reflection of my visor, I saw movement, something inside the station, something standing behind me. I woke up gasping, and when I looked up, my bunk light was flickering in the same rhythm. The crew's morale broke completely on the 6th day. Coleman started covering the walls with blankets to muffle the sound, while our communications officer kept the intercom turned up to full volume. But the knocks didn't stop. They started following us between rooms, always faint, always deliberate. Sometimes, if you pressed your ear to the wall, you could hear a second set of knocks echo back a few seconds later, like a reply from another depth. I realized something that night. The knocks weren't random, and they weren't warnings. They were mapping us, listening for movement, waiting for one of us to answer. When the sound came again, closer than ever, I counted 3 beats and whispered into the darkness, "What do you want?" I didn't knock, didn't move, just listened. The reply didn't come from outside. It came from behind me. After Morgan's disappearance, no one dared approach the viewports. Still, we needed to monitor the trench perimeter for structural shifts, so we relied on sonar almost entirely. But on the 9th night, the sonar logs began showing gaps, whole sections of the trench floor vanishing into static. That's when our external cameras picked something up. It started as a shimmer, a faint blur moving against the current. Coleman leaned toward the monitor, squinting, but I grabbed his arm before he got too close. Rule 5. If the external cameras show movement, but sonar detects nothing, shut down visual feed immediately, and do not look again. The rule existed for a reason, though at the time we didn't yet understand how dangerous sight could be down here. The blur on the screen grew clearer, twisting as if trying to focus itself. It wasn't moving toward us. It was adjusting. Like a lens turning. The camera feed flickered twice, and for a moment, the shape looked almost human. Then the image distorted, bending the entire view, like the water itself was warping around it. Coleman reached for the control panel, muttering that the feed was just interference. But I could see his reflection in the monitor. His eyes weren't following his own hands. I slapped the switch and cut power to the screen. The room plunged into dim red light, and Coleman shouted at me, but I told him we couldn't risk it. That's when we heard the faint static of the other monitors turning on by themselves. Across the room, one of the smaller screens flickered to life, showing the south corridor. Something stood in it, a silhouette, perfectly still, almost human in shape but slightly wrong. Its proportions were off. Its arms too long, its stance too balanced for something standing underwater. We hadn't had anyone in that corridor for hours. I shouted for everyone to stay back, and as I stepped forward, the figure on the screen tilted its head, not toward the camera, but toward me. Coleman panicked and ripped the power cables from the wall, but even after the feed went black, we could still see the faint outline of the shape burned into the glass, like a ghost image. It was facing the door. We stayed huddled in the lab, listening to the faint creaks of the station settling, until the emergency lights dimmed again. Then from the corridor outside, came the softest sound, a slow dragging metal against metal. We sealed the lab and activated secondary systems, switching to sonar-only mode. For a while, everything was silent. The sonar showed nothing, no motion, no signatures, just the endless trench below. But after a few minutes, faint interference lines started crawling up the display. They weren't movement readings, they were patterns, repeating sequences like a heartbeat. Something was out there, just beyond sonar range, mimicking the pulse of our own systems. At 0300 hours, the north camera feed came online by itself again. The power switches were still off, but the screen glowed faintly, like it was running on residual energy. The image was distorted, fogged with static, but I could still make out what it showed. Our crew, all of us, sitting exactly as we were in that moment. Only, the reflection wasn't synchronized. The figures on the feed were smiling. Slowly, one by one, I told everyone not to look, to turn away, but it was too late. The more you stared, the more the image seemed to shift closer, the perspective tightening until it felt like the camera was inside the room looking out. Coleman started trembling, whispering that he could see movement behind the reflections, shapes that weren't ours. I shut the feed again, but the after image lingered on the glass, faintly glowing in the dark. That night, none of us slept. The next morning, we found Coleman's bunk empty. The camera room door was ajar, its power switch flipped back on. Every screen was active, showing the same feed, Coleman standing outside in the black water, his hand resting on the camera housing. His body was motionless, but his reflection inside the monitor smiled wider with each flicker. We killed the power again, and this time we left it that way. No more visuals, no more curiosity. We moved entirely to sonar surveillance after that. But even then, sometimes we'd hear faint static in our comms, like a whisper beneath the signal. Sometimes, when we looked at the darkened screens, a faint outline shimmered there, our own reflections, just slightly delayed. That's when I began to realize, the things in the trench don't hunt by sound or movement. They hunt by vision, ours and theirs. Every time we looked, they saw back. Every time we watched too long, they learned the shape of us a little better. And now, even with the cameras off, I still feel their gaze pressing through the walls, waiting for someone foolish enough to turn the feed back on. By the time we reached the second week, sleep had become a luxury none of us could afford. The constant hum of failing systems, the distant echoes of water pressing against steel, and the knowledge that the cameras weren't really off had all chipped away at what was left of our sanity. Still, the captain forced us to maintain a routine. Lights dimmed at 2200 hours. Power checks at midnight. Rest if possible, between 0100 and 0600. We followed that routine because it was the only thread holding us together, until the night I heard the knock. I remembered Rule 6. If someone knocks on your cabin door after 2 a.m., don't answer. No one on the crew will be awake by then. But rules are easy to forget when you're half asleep, and something human sounds desperate on the other side. It started as a faint, hesitant tap, then another, 3 slow knocks, spaced evenly, soft enough to make me doubt I'd heard them at all. I glanced at my watch, 2:13 a.m. I froze. The corridor outside was pitch black. The station's night mode left only the emergency strip, glowing faint red. I told myself it must have been the pipes, or maybe Coleman, returning from another systems check. But then came a voice. It was muffled through the metal, quiet and cracked, but familiar. "Hey, open up, it's me." It was Coleman's voice, or close enough that my heart believed it. I climbed from the bunk and stood by the door, listening. The voice came again, closer now. "Come on, man, open the door. Something's wrong in the corridor." There was a wetness to the sound, a slow drag between words, like water caught in his throat. My hand hovered over the release latch. Every instinct screamed not to touch it, but fear of isolation is worse than fear of rules. I whispered, "Say something only you'd know," but the voice didn't hesitate. "You still keep that photo of your sister under your bunk." I froze. He shouldn't have known that. No one did. The knock came again, this time harder. The entire door vibrated under the impact, and I stumbled back. The voice changed. It wasn't Coleman anymore. It wasn't anyone. The words twisted, repeating fragments of my own speech from earlier that day, mimicking my tone, my rhythm, until it sounded like me. "Come on, man. Open the door," it said again, perfectly. That's when the lights flickered. For half a second, I saw a shadow pass across the small slit window on the door. Something tall, wrong, its movements too fluid for the narrow corridor. I stayed absolutely still. The station groaned again under pressure, and the thing outside began to drag its nails down the door, slow and deliberate. The sound was metallic, stretched, like it was savoring the moment. Then silence. For nearly 10 minutes, I didn't breathe. Finally, I heard retreating steps, wet, uneven, fading into the distance. I didn't sleep again that night. The next morning, I checked Coleman's cabin. He was still asleep, mouth open, breathing shallow but steady. When I woke him, he swore he hadn't left his bunk all night. His boots were dry. That should have comforted me, but it didn't. Because when I returned to my cabin, I noticed something scratched into the metal door. I was awake. Over the next few days, the knocking spread, first to the captain's quarters, then to the storage hatch near the submersible bay. Always after 2 a.m. Always just faint enough to question if it was real. We started sleeping in pairs, taking turns staying awake to make sure no one opened their doors. But exhaustion makes fools of everyone. The communications officer, Rayner, cracked first. He said he heard a child calling his name from outside his room, begging him to help. By the time we broke down his door the next morning, his bunk was empty, and his door latch was snapped clean in half from the inside. After that, no one slept alone. We started barricading our rooms with equipment, sealing the doors with welded plates. The captain ordered everyone to move into the central hub, where we could at least see each other. For a while that worked, until one night around 2:37 a.m., we all heard it. The knock came from the main hatch. 3 slow, heavy knocks that made the whole room vibrate. Then silence. We waited, staring at the door, no one daring to speak. A minute passed, then another set of knocks, this time from the ceiling, then the floor, like something was crawling over us, listening for weak spots. The captain mouthed the word "don't" and pointed to the door. I nodded, clutching a wrench tight enough to hurt my hand. The knocking stopped, but the lights flickered once more, and in that flicker, I saw movement in the glass viewport beside the hatch, the reflection of the room behind me. Only there were more of us reflected than should have been. By morning, the knocks had stopped, but none of us felt safe. We started marking every door with chalk, 3 white lines for those who were real, as if that meant anything anymore. I don't know if the rules are meant to keep the things out, or to keep us from joining them. But I know this, when something in the trench knocks, it isn't asking to come in, it's checking if you're still inside. By the 3rd week, we were barely functioning. The air recyclers hissed like they were struggling to breathe. The power grid flickered every few hours. And the captain's log entries had turned into single-line entries. "We're still here." Supplies were running low, but the real problem wasn't food or oxygen. It was pressure. Something outside had started circling the station. The sonar couldn't track it, and the cameras were still offline. But we could feel it, like a second heartbeat against the hull. Then one morning, the exterior oxygen pipeline failed, cutting off our secondary air supply. Coleman insisted someone had to go out and fix it manually. I reminded him of Rule 7. Never dive outside the station after sunset. The trench isn't empty at night. It just pretends to be. He said it wasn't night. Not yet. He was wrong. Down here, time doesn't mean what it does on the surface. We suited up, even though everything in my gut screamed against it. The dive bay was colder than usual, a thin frost creeping along the inner seal. When we flooded the chamber, the water rushed in too fast, as if pulled from the outside rather than pushed in. Coleman went first, stepping into the black, his tether light fading almost instantly. The trench swallowed him whole. I followed behind, keeping my torch fixed on the pipeline ahead. The world outside was a void, endless and heavy. Even the small movements of my arms felt slow, dreamlike. The trench floor below was nothing but soft silt and fragments of wreckage. Pieces of other things that had come down here and never left. Coleman's voice crackled through the comms. "Almost at the break," he said, his tone tight, breath short. I glanced at my depth gauge, 36,000 feet. The lights on my suit flickered, a pulse like a heartbeat, and then stabilized. "I see it," I replied. "Patch it and come back." Silence. "Coleman," I called again. A burst of static filled the line. Then his voice returned, faint and distorted. "Something's moving down here." My own breathing turned shallow. "Get back to the tether," I said, scanning the void. "You're too far." But he didn't answer this time. The water shifted. You don't feel movement in the deep like you do near the surface. It's slower, denser, like the ocean itself turning to watch. My torch beam caught something for just a moment. A pale curve, enormous and smooth, vanishing as quickly as it appeared. I felt the tug on my tether, hard enough to spin me. Coleman's comm came back online, his voice trembling. "It's looking at me." The feed crackled again, and then I heard a sound that didn't belong in any ocean. A deep, low vibration that felt like it was inside my skull. I pulled back on the tether, but it resisted. Something was holding it. The lights on my wrist flickered, showing movement in the distance. A shape, vaguely humanoid, moving toward me with impossible grace. My torchlight hit it for just a second, and I saw a face I recognized. It was Coleman, but wrong. His helmet was cracked, his eyes wide and unblinking, his body drifting unnaturally. His mouth opened, and my voice came out. "Help me." I screamed and cut the tether, slamming my way back toward the hatch. The external floodlights flickered once, showing dozens of pale figures drifting just beyond their reach, all facing the station. They weren't moving. They were waiting. I slammed the emergency seal and collapsed inside the bay. Gasp. When I looked through the small observation window, Coleman's suit was floating outside, still lit, but there was something else behind it, vast and shifting, as if the darkness itself had mass. When I finally made it back to the others, I couldn't speak. I just sat there, shaking, staring at the condensation running down my visor. The captain demanded to know what happened, but before I could answer, the lights flickered again. On the external feed monitor, still disconnected, still powered off, a faint image appeared for just a moment. Coleman standing in front of the hatch, his helmet cracked, his hand raised in a slow wave. That night, no one slept. The trench outside was silent again, but the pressure readings kept fluctuating. Something was moving, just beyond range. It wasn't the current. It wasn't debris. It was patient, waiting for one of us to step outside again. And the worst part, around midnight the dive bay lights turned on by themselves. The outer door was unlocked. After Coleman's disappearance, we sealed the dive bay and cut all external access. The captain even welded the manual release shut. None of us spoke much after that. What could we say? The trench had taken another one. Still, 3 nights later, the motion sensor near the airlock pinged. We thought it was a malfunction at first, until the proximity alarm began to flash. Something was moving just outside the station. The sonar read nothing. The cameras were still offline. I remembered Rule 8. If a crew member returns from a dive but doesn't speak first, isolate them immediately. It isn't them anymore. But hope does strange things to you down here. When the outer door began to cycle on its own, we ran to meet whoever, whatever, was coming through. Water flooded into the small chamber before draining back, and a single figure stepped inside. Coleman. His dive suit was intact, the tether line dragging behind him, but his helmet visor was dark. We froze as he took one slow step forward, then another. The captain whispered his name, but he didn't answer. He just stood there, silent, the faint drip of seawater echoing in the airlock. I reached for the comm switch, my heart pounding, and said, "Coleman, if you can hear me, take off your helmet." Nothing. He didn't move, didn't even breathe. The lights flickered once, and when they came back, he was looking directly at me. Something was off about his stance. Too still, too balanced, like he was being held up by invisible strings. I stepped back, and that tiny movement seemed to trigger him. He tilted his head, slow and mechanical, as if testing how much motion his neck could make. Then he took another step forward. The captain shouted for him to stop, but Coleman just kept walking. His boots left no wet prints on the floor. When he reached the bulkhead door, the motion sensor failed. The door slid open before we could stop it. Inside the main corridor, the air felt colder. The others backed away as Coleman moved through. Wordless. Rayner whispered that maybe he was in shock, but I couldn't shake the feeling that shock doesn't make someone move like that, without hesitation, without pause. I grabbed the emergency restraint kit from the wall and stepped toward him. "Coleman," I said softly, "you need to stay still, okay? We're going to help you." His visor tilted toward me, and for the first time he spoke, only it wasn't speech. It was the sound of water rushing through a narrow pipe, mixed with something like a whisper. The lights flickered again. For a fraction of a second, I saw something behind the glass of his visor, not a face, but the faint suggestion of movement, like liquid shifting where eyes should be. The captain lunged forward, slamming the containment lever that sealed off the corridor. Coleman didn't fight. He just stood there, staring through the glass at us. Then slowly, he raised his hand and pressed it against the barrier. A faint black smear spread from his glove. Not oil, not blood. Something thicker, darker, alive. We moved him into isolation, forcing the chamber door shut and cutting its power. Through the small viewport, his figure remained still for hours, unmoving. Around 0400, the intercom crackled to life. "It's cold," said a voice that sounded like Coleman's. "Please, let me out." We froze. The captain hesitated, but I knew that tone wasn't his. It wasn't anyone's. It was copying the last voice it remembered. At 0600, the captain checked the chamber again. Empty. The suit was still there, but hollow, water pooling at the base, like something had melted out of it. The walls were covered in streaks, thin black lines that looked like they'd been drawn from inside. The air inside the chamber was damp, almost misty, and smelled faintly of salt and metal. We shut it off permanently after that. Later that day, I caught my reflection in the viewport glass and froze. Behind me, for just a second, I saw a faint outline. Someone standing in the same position as Coleman had been. Helmet tilted slightly, hands raised. When I turned, no one was there. But when I looked back at the glass, the figure was closer. That night, as I tried to sleep, I heard footsteps pacing outside the crew quarters. Slow, even, like someone walking the same path over and over again. I didn't move, didn't breathe. The sound stopped outside my door, and for a moment, everything went silent. Then came a whisper, my name, spoken in my own voice. The next morning, the captain ordered all reflective surfaces covered again. Mirrors, screens, even metal panels. We knew now, whatever comes back from outside doesn't always stay outside. Sometimes it comes in wearing the skin of what we lost, and sometimes it learns how to speak. The first time I heard it, I thought it was the engines. A deep, low vibration, like 1,000 cello strings resonating through the hull. But then the power flickered, and every loose object in the room began to tremble. I remembered Rule 9. If the ocean starts humming, shut down all systems and stay absolutely still until it stops. My instinct was to check the monitors, but the screens began to pulse in rhythm with the sound. It wasn't coming from the station. It was coming from outside. The Mariana Trench itself was singing, and something about the tone felt alive, like it was searching for us through the dark. The captain barked the shutdown command, and one by one the lights went out until only the faint glow of the emergency lamps remained. The hum grew deeper, almost like it was circling us, testing the metal walls. I pressed my palms against my ears, but it didn't help. The sound wasn't entering through hearing, It was inside my chest, vibrating through my bones. The station seemed to breathe with it, groaning softly, as if the trench had its hand around our home and was squeezing just to see what sound we'd make. No one moved. Even breathing felt dangerous, like the noise would sense the disturbance. Minutes passed, maybe hours. It was impossible to tell. Every muscle in my body ached from holding still. Then, as suddenly as it had come, the hum stopped. The silence that followed was worse. The captain motioned for us to wait a little longer before restoring power. When the lights finally flickered back on, I realized I had tears running down my face without knowing why. The others looked the same, pale, wide-eyed, trembling. Something had brushed against us, something massive and unseen, and it had let us live. We thought it was over. We were wrong. At 0200, the sound came again, softer this time, more like a lullaby than a threat. But now, it wasn't just the hull vibrating, it was the air itself. The humming seemed to carry words. I couldn't understand them, but the rhythm of it drew me toward the viewport. I knew better, I really did, but I moved anyway. The sea outside was darker than ink, yet within it, faint ripples of light moved in perfect patterns, as if responding to the hum. The melody pulled me closer, and for a second, I saw shapes moving just beyond visibility. Not fish, not anything I recognized, but fluid silhouettes twisting to the song. Then the captain grabbed me and yanked me back. "Don't listen," he hissed. "It's trying to find a resonance." I didn't know what that meant, but the fear in his eyes said enough. We shut everything down again, this time, including life support, for 2 minutes. Total stillness. The temperature dropped, and frost began forming along the walls. The hum deepened again, now angry, throbbing in waves. The floor shook so violently that a few tools fell from their racks. I held my breath and stared into the dark, praying it wouldn't notice us. And then it changed pitch. It became higher, almost sharp, like a whale's call played backward. I could feel it behind my eyes. My vision blurred, and for a moment, I thought I saw light pouring in through the cracks of the metal, but not from outside, from within. The air shimmered, and the walls bent slightly inward, as if something enormous was pressing its face against the outer shell of the station. Then silence again. The captain ordered a systems diagnostic after power returned. No malfunctions, no damage, but our clocks were off. 3 hours missing. We had all been awake the entire time. The log files showed nothing, yet something had changed. The oxygen levels were slightly lower, and there were faint traces of hydrogen sulfide, a gas that shouldn't exist at our depth. The hum had left something behind, something chemical and unseen. Later that night, I woke up to a faint echo of the sound again, not through the walls but from inside my head, a low, steady vibration beneath my skull. When I turned to look at my bunkmate, he was already sitting up, staring at the ceiling. "Do you hear it too?" I whispered. He didn't answer, just nodded once. Slow, we both sat there, frozen, while the hum rolled gently through the room like waves on the shore. It didn't stop until dawn. By morning, 3 crew members had nosebleeds. The captain forbade anyone from speaking about the sound. We'd all felt it. We knew it was waiting, somewhere in the deep, rehearsing that melody until it found the right frequency, the one that would make us open every door, power every light, and call it home. When I pressed my ear against the hull that night, I could swear I heard whispers between the notes. Not words, but the sound of something learning how to sing. I didn't understand Rule 10. Never open the decompression chamber if the person inside is smiling when it was first explained to me. It sounded ridiculous, even cruel. Why would someone smile down here? And if they did, wouldn't that mean they'd survived? But that night, as the trench's hum faded into silence, we had to use the chamber for the first time since arriving. Carter, one of the junior divers, had been outside for a hull inspection when his comms went dead. We pulled him in manually, his suit scratched, the front visor fogged from inside. He wasn't answering, but we could see movement through the glass. Relief hit us all at once, until he turned his head and we saw his face. He was smiling. Not a shaky, trauma-laced grin, but a calm, unwavering smile that didn't belong to someone who'd just stared death in the face. His eyes were wide, locked straight on the viewport, and his lips moved like he was humming to himself. The captain froze, and so did we. The gauge on the chamber read stable pressure, no oxygen issues, no sign of panic, but the longer we looked, the more wrong it felt. His skin seemed paler than before, almost gray under the lights, and his hands rested flat against the window, as if he was testing the glass. The intercom crackled. At first, it was static, then his voice came through. "It's beautiful out there. You should see it. We should have left him. That's what the rule was for. But guilt doesn't care about rules." I argued to let him out, to help him, to talk to him. "Maybe he's just in shock," I said. The captain's stare was cold. "You didn't hear him," he muttered. "He didn't come back alone." Those words sank into me like lead. Then the lights flickered again, and for a moment, I thought I saw something moving behind Carter's shoulder inside the chamber. A faint ripple, like heat distortion underwater, forming the vague outline of another face behind his. The hum returned, quieter this time, almost like a heartbeat echoing through the walls. Carter's lips stopped moving. Slowly, he leaned closer to the glass, until his smile filled the viewport completely. His teeth looked too white, too perfect, stretched wider than a human mouth should allow. My stomach turned. The captain slammed his palm on the control console. "No one touches that chamber," he barked. Not until it stopped smiling. Hours passed. The smile never faded. He didn't blink, didn't breathe visibly, didn't shift an inch, but every few minutes, the chamber's microphone picked up faint noises, whispers, gurgles, sometimes laughter, though it didn't sound like his voice anymore. The sound carried through the hallways, faint and distant, echoing like a lullaby through metal corridors. Some of the crew started whispering that maybe Carter wasn't in there at all anymore, that whatever came back just wore him like a diving suit. I tried to sleep that night, but I couldn't. The humming in my skull hadn't gone away since the last encounter, and now it mixed with something else. Faint tapping on the metal near my bunk. When I checked the monitors, the camera feed from the chamber showed Carter still smiling. But this time, he was looking straight into the lens. I blinked, and his mouth moved again, forming words I couldn't hear. The video feed glitched, scrambled with static. When it cleared, he was gone. The chamber was empty. The alarm blared seconds later. The decompression seal had been disengaged. We rushed to the control room. The door to the chamber was wide open, frost coating the edges of the frame. Carter's suit was folded neatly on the floor, still dripping seawater, no trace of him. But the smell that filled the air, that dense metallic scent of the deep, told us he'd been here, or something had. The captain ordered the chamber sealed permanently. No one argued. The next morning, another diver, Elena, began humming softly during breakfast. It was the same rhythm we'd heard through the intercom the night before. When I asked her what she was humming, she looked confused. "I don't know," she said. "It's just stuck in my head." Later I found her standing outside the chamber door, fingers brushing against the handle. She didn't even seem aware of what she was doing. "He's calling me," she whispered. I pulled her away, but when she turned, her eyes glistened, not from tears, but from faint moisture, like condensation. That's when I realized the humming wasn't just sound anymore. It was spreading, like a frequency infecting our thoughts. One by one, the crew began to hum it unconsciously. When I tried to sleep, I heard faint singing through the ventilation, almost human but hollow, repeating in waves. Sometimes, the lyrics seemed to shift into words. "Surface, surface," that was all it said. The captain and I stayed awake for 2 nights, keeping watch by the sealed chamber. On the third, I saw something move behind the glass again. a reflection that wasn't ours. The light flickered, and there, just for a second, Carter's face pressed against the window again, that same impossible smile stretching wider with each pulse of the lights. The captain raised his gun, but before he could fire, the power went out completely. The hum returned, louder than ever, shaking the station from the foundations. We dropped to the floor, covering our ears, waiting for it to end. When the lights came back, the chamber door was open again, and this time, the smile was gone, but the water dripping from the threshold shimmered faintly in the red emergency glow, like it was alive. The captain stepped forward, but I grabbed his arm. "If you open it again," I whispered, "it'll smile for you next." We sealed the whole section off after that. But every once in a while, when the trench goes quiet, you can still hear someone humming behind the sealed door, low, patient, and waiting. I thought I understood fear by then, the kind that crawls under your skin and stays there. But Rule 11, if you see something rise from the abyss, never record it, and never say its name, taught me what real terror feels like. We were only supposed to stay in the trench another 3 days, but after Carter's disappearance and the humming infection spreading through the crew, the captain decided to cut the mission short. The ascent sequence was prepared. We were leaving, but then the sonar picked up something vast moving beneath us, bigger than the station, slower than current, and colder than the surrounding water. It rose from the deepest part of the trench, from where no map, no probe, no light had ever reached. At first it was just static on the monitor, a blur of shifting density. Then the hum began again, faint and almost melodic, vibrating through the deck plates. The captain ordered the system shut off, but the sonar kept transmitting on its own, as though something was sending data back. The screen flashed, and a single word appeared across the console, not typed, not from our system, just written in faint, flickering letters. Surface. That's when we lost communications completely. The water pressure gauges began to drop. Even though we hadn't initiated ascent, something massive was pushing us upward from below. The crew scrambled to stabilize, but the power flickered out. For a few moments, only the emergency lights glowed red through the room. Then the viewport turned black, not dark, not empty, but black, like something enormous had covered it entirely. It pressed close enough that the hull groaned, and I swear I saw the faint outline of movement, like a colossal limb scraping along the metal. Someone whispered, "We're not alone." The captain told us not to look, not to record, not to even speak about what we saw. But one of the techs, Reyes, grabbed a camera anyway. "People need to know what's down here," he said. He pointed it toward the viewport and hit record. The screen went white, the power surged. Every light exploded at once. The hum stopped. For 5 full seconds, there was only silence, and then a wet cracking sound filled the air, followed by screaming. Reyes dropped the camera, clutching his face, blood seeping between his fingers. His eyes were gone, burned out completely, as if whatever he'd seen through the lens had erased them. The recording light was still blinking. The captain smashed the camera with a wrench, shouting that it wasn't meant to be captured, that we'd doomed ourselves by trying. The floor trembled. I could feel the pressure building again, this time from inside the station, like the air itself was trying to escape. I ran to seal the bulkheads, but the metal began to buckle. From the viewport, a thin, glowing fissure appeared in the darkness, a slit, widening slowly, revealing something behind it. Not light, not water, something that moved like both. It pulsed, breathed, and in that instant, I understood why no one should name it. It wasn't just alive, it was aware, ancient, and listening. The captain turned to me, whispering, "Don't speak it, don't even think it." His voice shook. "That's how it finds you." The rest of the crew began whispering prayers under their breath, but the air around us vibrated with something close to speech. A chorus of whispers layered over the hum, repeating the same word again and again. Surface, surface. The lights dimmed, and one by one, the systems died. The captain grabbed the manual detonator for the emergency ballast release. "We're ending this," he said, pulling the lever. The sound that followed was indescribable. A roar, a rush of pressure, and then silence. When I woke, the station was tilted, half submerged in darkness. The others were gone. No blood, no signs of struggle, just gone. I stumbled to the control deck and checked the pressure readings. We were no longer at the bottom of the trench. We were rising slowly, uncontrolled. Outside, something vast moved upward with us, pacing our ascent like a shadow. I didn't look directly. I didn't need to. The hum had changed. It wasn't deep anymore. It was soft, almost tender, like a lullaby sung through water, and beneath it, faintly, my name. I shut down every recording device, every sensor, every feed. My hands trembled as I manually disabled the cameras. For a moment I thought it was gone, until the glass in front of me began to fog from the outside. A handprint appeared, massive and translucent, pressing gently against the viewport. The hum rose again, steady and patient. It wasn't trying to break in. It was waiting for me to look. I covered my eyes and stayed perfectly still, whispering the rules to myself like a prayer. Don't record, don't name it, don't look. The ascent stopped. The gauges froze, then the intercom crackled to life. A voice came through, my voice, calm and clear. "It's beautiful out here," it said. "You should see it." I backed away, shaking my head, refusing to listen. "You can't stay down here forever," the voice continued. "It's waiting for you. It always waits." The hum grew deeper until the glass began to vibrate again. I screamed for it to stop, for everything to end, and then silence. Total, suffocating silence. I don't know how long it's been. The power is running low. The logs say we're drifting upward, but the sensors show nothing above us, just darkness. I keep hearing faint sounds beyond the hull. Not movement, not tapping, but something like breathing. Sometimes, when I close my eyes, I can feel the water around us shifting, parting slightly, as if something enormous is gliding past. I've followed every rule, every single one, and yet I think it knows I'm still here. If anyone ever finds this recording, remember what I said. There are 11 rules, and the last one matters most. If you see something rise from the abyss, don't record it. Don't say its name. Don't even think it, because once you do, it'll start thinking of you too. If you enjoyed this story, like, share, and subscribe for more.